We're here with the Players Coalition today.
Back here with the Players Coalition.
We're here with Mr. Anquan Boldin.
Eagles safety Malcolm Jenkins. Saints linebacker Demario Davis.
Jason.
There you go.
And Devin McCourty.
Yep. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Thanks for having me on here, man.
I am quite privileged and honored to be here talking about social justice and social impact. Can you just talk to us a little bit about social justice? What is it? I mean, it varies for so many different people. They step into it in many different ways. Can you just talk to us about it generally?
Well, I would just say in general terms, from my education, it's just always been about equality and equality of people.
For myself, how I look at social justice is finding a realm of fairness and equality.
Social justice means to me just justice, period.
I think that, or at least I would say that social justice and the idea of it has come a long way in the past 5 to 7 years.
Social justice to me has always been about equality for humanity.
Yes.
As it pertains to the National Football League.
Okay.
And social justice, that has been clearly defined in 3 areas: economic advancement,
Yes, sir.
police and community relations, and criminal justice reform.
Right.
Which I think is important that we bring context to the National Football League's role in its efforts towards social justice.
I think athletes are more thoughtful. They understand what their place is in society, and they also understand when they make a take, for the most part, what the reaction is going to be. I think some of it has to do with social media and them actually learning through watching how people react to them having a genuine concern for something that's going on in society.
Because you say over the past 5 to 7 years, and that would predate Kaepernick. And
correct. Before social media, the reason I said it, I think that it really is post-Kaepernick. People have been even more thoughtful to understand what the consequences are. Consequences is unfortunately seems to be a negative word. That's not how I'm talking about it, though.
Gotcha.
I think it's basically since the advent of social media whereby we could understand what the reaction of the world is better than ever before because the world is smaller.
I see. So the idea is that the choices that you make, if they're on this platform that so many people can see, there are consequences to these actions and to what you do, whether you're socially engaged or not.
You know, you look back to when this whole thing started with Kaepernick. I actually did a documentary for the NFL Network about it called The Conversation. And we were trying to figure out how do we go about trying to, as you're saying right here, make sense of all this.
Sure.
Because it was coming so fast.
Sure.
And you knew that, I knew as a black man what was happening, but I also knew the dangers, the pitfalls of what he was trying to accomplish, what the other players were trying to accomplish as far as getting their message out and having it heard.
Yeah, lots of tripwires.
And not having it stolen.
Yeah.
And so what I've really been encouraged by is that a lot of players through this coalition have understood the importance of getting into the system. And I talked to Malcolm Jenkins about this in that documentary. He said something that was very profound. He said sometimes we want to change the system by going around the people involved in the system instead of incorporating them in the conversation.
Injustice, and what you've openly spoken up about and actually penned an op-ed about is criminal justice reform. We've seen you openly speak up about this. There's been other athletes involved as well. Literally, Maya Moore gave up her career to fight this battle. Spoke to Demario Davis here, speaking also on prison reform, which is a branch of that as well. Explain to them why criminal justice reform is unfair in this country, and why does it continuously punish the people that look like me and you?
Yeah, I think, criminal justice reform is such a broad term because the system is so broad. You've got, bail, parole, and probation. You've got behind bars, pretrial, once you get out, reentry, what things contribute to recidivism. And so for me, I started to look at how do you keep people from going back to jail, because we recognize that this system is cyclical and it's set up in a way in which if you offend it or you get caught up in it, it's very, very easy to stay in it, even if you don't commit another crime.
Then during their stay, they're staying in horrible conditions. Like they're going in and they're coming out worse than they were when they were going in because of the type of environment that prison is. So there's no reform, there's no rehabilitation. You're being done away with when you go to jail. But you got to think about going to jail and going to prison. That person isn't gone forever. They got to come back into society. So you're going to send somebody in one way for a crime and punishment, but they're going to come out worse than they went in?
Added trauma on trauma.
Yeah. That's not a good thing for anybody.
I think right now there's a complete imbalance when it comes to justice, and you can see how it's issued out.
Okay.
When it comes to our communities.
In Orlando, we arrested 2 6-year-olds, handcuffed. That happens in your country.
Yeah.
And although I do think America is great, I've had a chance to travel. You know, I've been blessed to travel to many different countries, and I think that we're a blessed nation.
Sure.
But you can't tell me we're a great nation, as great as we say that we are, when we're arresting 6-year-olds in our country.
Yeah.
Or we have in Massachusetts 7-year-olds standing in front of a judge. What can a 7-year-old do to be standing in front of a judge?
Yes.
Makes no sense to me.
You look at, one, what are the things that you have to keep you from going into prison or to jail in the first place? So let's look at prevention, whether it be education or programs that give people an opportunity to do the right thing. Once they do get caught up in the system, you want them to have the proper representation. You don't want them being held because they're too poor. You want everybody to have a fair shake at justice, which most people don't go to trial because the way our bail system is set up, if you're broke, they can leverage, the ability to keep you in prison, or if you go to trial, they give you more time and punish you for challenging, your freedom or your innocence. So most people just plea out and they take the record, and then what that record does is keep you locked in the system. Keeps you in the system. So whether you're on parole, probation, you violate your parole for something very, very, minimal that's not even breaking the law, that if you weren't on probation or parole, wouldn't have gotten you anything but maybe a fine, can send you right back to prison.
When we had civil rights, we were fighting for that back in the 60s. There were tangible things you could see as victories, right?
Yeah.
And so you knew, all right, you want to change voting laws.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be able to eat in the same places and use the same bathrooms and go to the same schools and have equality.
Sure.
And you can measure that. Some of the things that we're talking about today are not so easily measured.
And I think the biggest part about it is that we've seen that the system doesn't work. We saw it with the war on drugs and how it really ended up being a war on poverty and decimated Black and brown communities across the country by incarcerating leaders, fathers, mothers, innovators, and just literally decimated, communities. All of the statistics say that the tough on crime rhetoric and policy makes it worse. It's more expensive for us to house people than it is to educate people. When you keep somebody in the system, it keeps them, not only keeps them in the system, but it generationally affects that household. And you create pockets of communities that are just in despair because of the system. And it's so broad that you really got to be meticulous about how you go about it.
So what's being done that changes that a little bit? The education absolutely is
The
there.
education part, and then there's the policy part behind it.
So some of the education is what are the court visits that you all have organized?
Yeah, we
and things
do
like that?
court watches, we do town halls, and for us it's trying to educate the public about what's going on in here. And I think we failed as a society. I think we failed as a culture, especially when you're talking about Black culture.
Yes. What do you mean?
We don't know. Like, we do not know what is going on every day in our communities.
Right.
We don't attend meetings that we should be flooding. We don't hold elected officials accountable. Like, we go elect somebody just because of what we heard or what we've seen. You know what I'm saying? Like, so-and-so for commissioner.
And name
or
recognition without doing the due diligence.
And it's unfortunate because in this day and age, with how much technology is at our fingertips,
Yes.
you have the opportunity to go and check the track record of everybody that is up for election.
I think it's really important for us to
to realize what we are and what kind of climate that we're in. And I have a son, so I have to always talk to him about this type of stuff.
Yeah. How old is he?
He's 9. It's crazy I got to have this conversation with a son that's 9 years old.
I was just talking to Anquan. I have a 12-year-old and a 4-year-old son. His is 15, and we were talking about the same thing. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about that.
I have to let him know what the situation is now. Like, I just want him to get home.
Okay.
And so my mom didn't have this conversation with me until I was older. And I had to have this with my son at 9. And so what we're going to do is sit around and wait till he have to have this conversation with his son. When his son is 6.
Right.
It's getting earlier and earlier. So, like I said, that's a massive imbalance of justice in our country right now that needs to be changed.
Well, I think certainly what Malcolm Jenkins has done as far as creating conversations with politicians,
yes,
like changing laws. Really, actually, in Massachusetts, they've changed laws.
Yeah.
I look at what Ben Watson has done in New Orleans as far as dealing with people who have been sex trafficking.
Yeah.
As far as working with that area, because that's part of this too.
Yeah.
It's not just black people getting shot by cops.
Absolutely.
So he's broadened the definition. So for me, that's the important thing. What I see day in and day out, which encourages me and makes me happy, is that it's about the work.
So what gives you the courage and the motivation to do that, to step outside of your comfort zone and to do the work? Because it seems, and I know, I'm just talking black man to black men here, right? I think there are so many common narratives of us that, that other us, right? So you're athletes, so as a result of that, you have to be tabula rasa and not think of anything else except going to the gym or whatnot. But can you just give us a little bit of texture around why would you do this? Who's pouring into you? What did your family look like? Any of those kinds of things?
I think it's a multitude of reasons. I think one of it is the people that have come before you. I think, like you just said, when Cap took a knee, that was huge. And there were so many guys that was just like, wow. Like, then you start to look into, well, why did he take a knee? And then you start to see the reasons.
It is a all-encompassing 360 application of both policy, investment, empowerment, conversation, justice. I mean, the wheel keeps on spinning round and round, and I believe our responsibility as players is to be that hub.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody we can't talk to. There's nobody we can't go to. There's nobody we can't have a conversation with. Now we need to be able to bring all those people together.
That's been the good thing about the coalition, just having a bunch of different guys focus on a few areas. Whereas, I've been on the criminal justice thing. You got some guys that are on education, some guys that are talking about economics and job opportunity. But it's so broad that we need everybody to recognize what's going on first and then really stand on the table so that we can change this. Because, quite frankly, the system is working like it was designed to work. And that's one thing that that we don't talk about often, is that this system was designed to protect a certain population at the expense of another. And over time, it's really just destroyed, I think, the fabric of this country. And until we think about radical changes to how we go about, punishment or, correcting people, we'll continue to be in this cycle.
You're looking at the things that are going on in our country, and it's just like, well, I need to do something. Like, why wouldn't I? I'm here. I have the platform. My platform may not be as big as Colin Kaepernick's, but my platform's a lot bigger than a lot of other people that look like me. So I think that inspired a lot of people. When you talk about the Malcolm X's, the Martin Luther Kings, the Rosa Parks, people that have come before you, that have laid the groundwork, that have allowed you to do some of the things you've been able to do. Jackie Robinson, guys within the sports realm, but just people in general in our society.
And there's a lot of noise out there. A lot of people are hating for a lot of different reasons. And sometimes, as black people, this, we get caught up sometimes in who's getting the credit.
Yeah.
Or who's getting the love, or who's responsible for this.
Yeah.
Why are someone's not getting their shine? And really, that's not really the point of all this. Again, going back to the 60s, Martin Luther King had one way of doing business. Malcolm X had one way of doing business. The Black Panthers had one way of doing business. It didn't always jive.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people who felt like that person is not doing it the way it should be done. End of the day, if you're doing it, that's what matters.
I think athletes over the past 5 or 7 years have had more thoughtful contributions to social justice, or have understood before they opened their mouth the idea of how it's going to play out, which I think is very important. Because I think before, it just played out as it just would have played out naturally. And if you can affect things by how your voice, what you do from the very beginning, how coordinated you seem, taking time to understand how people react to it, and whether you want to say it or not.
Yeah. And I was with a great player, Sean Alexander, this past weekend, and I was with some other amazing leaders that are just the same as Anquan Boldins and the Richard Shermans of the world. To have that conversation and to know the power of our network, which creates our net worth, we need to be able to give that back as well as invest in the future.
So where does that attachment to responsibility come from? I think
that comes from my community, my family, my friends, my parents. That comes from looking around and saying that there's no way in the world I was able to be on this stage of the NFL without help.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's also one of the challenges, because there's, as much as I'm talking about this, there's some other psychological things that creep in, which is ego.
Well, for me, it's just taking responsibility for your place in this world, being compassionate. It's recognizing that there are a lot of things out there that are happening, that even though you live in a place, as athletes at least, where you are financially above it, that you recognize the importance of helping other people get through difficulties of life. You recognize that structurally, the challenge is dealing with that part of it.
At the end of the day, I think, as a professional athlete, especially in the coalition, I'd say it's nothing special about us. That's just me speaking. I'm not speaking for everybody else, but that's how I look at it. It's nothing special about us. What's special about us is our position that we have. And anytime, we can unmask ourselves and be a magnifying glass towards things that are important, we should take the opportunity to do that. I feel like we have an awesome responsibility to do that. And so, I'm proud of the NFL. I'm proud we stick behind each other. I'm proud that we understand that nothing's perfect. I'm proud that we understand that there's going to be ebbs and flows, there's going to be ups and downs, but if we have a consistency as a core group of men that realize what we're capable of doing, over time we'll see it happen.